On today's episode, I turbocharge my Jeep. We back our car down ramps. And we forget one of the most important pieces when putting the engine back in. Stay tuned. This thing needs a bath. I was gonna sandblast it. Right now I can't get any sand. Budget's tight. And I think a pressure wash and like a degrease will be better. I'm gonna leave this thing hanging. I'm gonna turn the hoist around so we can move all of this to put it out of our outside through the golf cart door. We're gonna grab the pressure washer and we're gonna give this thing a hose down. I'm literally just gonna work at getting the grime off. And with that done, it's now time, having learned our lesson from the blue Jeep, to lower the silver Jeep off the ramps, hopefully with no incident.
Brake. Wasn't so bad.
And on to the game of musical chairs, with now neither Jeep being operable. Pushing them forward and back to swap places in the garage is the easiest way to make the most out of the limited space I have. In our previous episode, you will have noticed that we installed a winch in the floor, and that's what we used to back the blue Jeep out and keep it from crashing into one of the Audis parked outside. Our driveway has quite a bit of a slope on it, and pushing it up does take a lot out of you, so having the winch installed in the floor just makes life a little bit more enjoyable when it comes to moving cars in and out. As a bonus, we do have a semi-strict HOA, which hasn't really caused us any issues. We have really good neighbors that are cool with us. But just in case there's that one Karen that happens to drive down the street while we're moving the car in, this makes it much less conspicuous. So the one major changeover that I did have to take into consideration was swapping the mounts. I don't know if they would have lined up in exactly the same place, but the 05 mounts do bolt to a different location on the block. The only thing I had to move was the ground for the starter. The other thing I took into consideration was the mounts from the 07 Jeep looked in much better condition than the silver one, so it was just for peace of mind.
When did you get in here?
Hey, look, I got a turbo, man.
Silliness over, now it was time to get back to work, and I had to work on getting the exhaust manifold that had been stuck from the original engine pull out since the little clips that held the nuts on were spinning, so it was time to break out the grinder. The exhaust manifold removed from the car and mounted to the engine, it was time to actually put this thing back in. It's pretty much a reversal of the removal process. Make sure all your stuff's out of the way so you don't pinch anything. This is definitely a place where I would have preferred to have the other engine lift with casters on the long legs, the part that goes under the engine. It would have made this part much easier. Remember when I said this little thing here? That's called the starter locator plate. This is everyone says, the biggest pain in the because if this thing shifts while you're loading the engine in, which you can see that it literally moves on its own, if this thing shifts, you're screwed.
Guess who forgot about it completely?
Well, after a rainstorm and suffering another GoPro failure, we were able to reach our goal of having most of the top end of the engine put together and the engine and trans bolted up. As the night fell, we went ahead and decided to clean up the garage and call it a night so we could get a fresh start in the morning. All right, so here's the sit rep. Here's where we stand. I have to finish bolting down the intake manifold. I've got all the injectors connected. NOx sensors are connected. Emissions is connected. Yes, that's the tube for the EGR. Not connected since this engine technically doesn't have an EGR. So I'm gonna have to hack. I'll zoom in on the camera. I'm gonna have to hack that thing off and effectively just plug it in, and I'm gonna run this with an EGR block effectively, since it's just going to be a sensor there. Anyways, I'm running out of things to plug in. I got what feels like the ignition coils left, and maybe a sensor on the intake box. I've got the torque converter bolts connected. I've got the starter motor connected. Starter motor's attached, and I never disconnected it, so that's good, assuming that I don't destroy the flex plate in this process. But that's what the starter locator plate is supposed to be for. To test fire it, I don't need the alternator, the AC compressor, or the power steering pump. None of those have to be attached. Gotta take this thing off. The socket that I have on the you know what, let's take this off first so I don't hit the radiator. And then let's take this off. There we go. So that doesn't come flat off. It's got fresh oil in it. And a new filter, which is important. So once I put the coils and connect them, we can test fire Sharkbait. Ooh ha ha. It's been nearly 2 years since this thing has run. I remember the day that it died on me, and it hurt. My dad's Jeep just crapping out, pulling into the dealership to take my car in for service. I held on to this thing no matter what. I said, I am going to get this engine back. It's one of the few things I have left from my dad. And I said, I need to get this thing back on the road. I think this was the longest vehicle he had at the time. So once everything was back on enough for us to test fire this thing, the wave of emotion that hit me when it finally fired up was way more than I expected. And all I could think of was my dad. I know for most people, an engine starting up is no big deal. But for me, when my dad passed away, this was his last car. And it's one of the few things I have left from him. Having this thing fire back up after dying on me almost 2 years ago, it just feels incredible.